Now to the bottom of page 535. So after this heading here, and I'm going to skip down five lines after the first comma in the sentence. And Kant is talking about how it is that we're conceiving of this free will that he wants to assert is rational but technically not known in the way that objects of experience are known. So he's thinking of this free human will, he says, as intelligible in its action as a thing in itself, and as sensible in the effects of that action as an appearance in the world of sense. Right? So in order for this freedom to mean what we want it to mean, it cannot be, as I said in the previous video, something that's just happening out there in the world of things in themselves. We have to posit some kind of connection between the world of things in themselves and the world of appearances. And we see Kant, if you turn the page to 536, and I won't read the top of page 536, but I'll refer you to that as a passage that you want to review in detail. But what Kant does there is he distinguishes two characters of an event in the world, and it's specifically an event of choosing that we would want to ascribe to free will. So let's say that I encounter a situation where there's something that would be in my self-interest, like lying in order to get out of a difficult situation. Well, the moral law says to me, or conscience, however you want to talk about it, my sense of moral obligation says to me that I shouldn't lie, even if it might be in my self-interest to lie. And let's say I don't lie. Well, the way that I'm thinking about that is that I actually have a choice about how to do it, about which action to take. So Kant says, let's look at that apparent action, that apparent choice that I've made, not to lie on moral grounds, and how it is that we actually want to describe it, right? So rationalists will tend to want to describe it as some kind of miraculous intervention in the natural course of events. And Kant wants to be clear that he can't see that solution as rational in any sense. If it's a condition of the possibility of experience that all events in our experience must have a cause, right, then we cannot see free will as interrupting the chain of causation. So we have to come up with a different solution from that. That can't be the solution. And so Kant wants to say, from the level of things as they appear to us, the event that we're wanting to say is a moral choice that is made freely on the basis of some sense of moral obligation, that in its empirical character, we have to describe it as caused, right? And the way we have to describe it as caused is really through the idea that I, as a human being, from the perspective of appearances, I am causally determined, right? So there are certain psychological laws that the activity in my brain has to behave. So today we would say there's a combination of physical, chemical, and psychological laws, right? So if we want to just reduce it to the brain and what's going on in the brain has a certain architecture, right? Different parts that have different functions. There are electrical things going on and there are chemical things going on that are mediating the electrical processes, right? Either hindering the electrical processes or promoting the electrical processes, and that are a part of the signaling from one neuron to another. And if Kant were alive today, he would say it's entirely possible that those physical causal explanations are all that there is from the perspective of the world of appearances. He doesn't want to deny determinism at the level of appearances. So that's what he calls the empirical character of the event. An empirical character means essentially how we're describing it. We're describing the action as a part of the empirical cause and effect nexus. But Kant wants to say it's because of the distinction that we've been forced to make, starting with the transcendental aesthetic and continuing through the transcendental logic, including the transcendental deduction. Kant wants to say, because of that distinction between things in themselves and appearances that we've been forced to make by the transcendental method, by transcendental reflection, it is open to us to ascribe a different character to the human will as a thing in itself. And that's called the intelligible character, which is our way of describing that action as free. So Kant wants to say, I can look at that single event of choosing not to lie, even though it would be in my self-interest. I can look at it from its empirical character. I can describe it in terms of a stimulus-response mechanism, right? What would the stimulus be? Maybe something like what Freud calls, what is it that Freud calls this thing? In German, it's the Über-Ich, the superego. Sorry, it's translated in English as the superego. So, Freud's explanation of moral conscience is essentially our parents teach us certain moral rules in an attempt to get us to obey them, and we internalize those moral rules. And it's sort of a sickness. It's a pathological thing that happens. Okay, so Kant would say, yeah, we can explain it that way. That's a satisfactory explanation. It's just that it's not a complete explanation. And it cannot be a complete explanation, even if it's a universal and necessary explanation from the point of view of our experience. But it can't be a complete explanation because it does not tell us what's happening at the level of things in themselves, right? What could be happening at the level of things in themselves is I'm making a free, spontaneous choice, right? And that choice is having an effect in the sensible world. Does that mean that the brain activity is not there? No. Does it mean that Freud's superego explanation of moral conscience is not there? No. Both of those would still be in place for Kant. They would simply be incomplete explanations. The way that Kant would describe them is that outside of space, outside of time, outside of the world as it appears to me, I, as a thing in itself, have chosen those physical and psychological causes, those chains of causation, to take place. So you have the idea of an action that begins in the world of things in themselves. That's the intelligible character, describing it from the perspective that might be true of things in themselves. An action that begins in the intelligible character and ends up in the empirical character. Again, it's open to us to have these two descriptions, the description of the event in terms of the empirical character of the event and the explanation of the event in terms of the intelligible character of the event, because we've been forced to make this distinction between things in themselves and appearances. And so here you have a fleshing out of what Kant means by a resolution, the way that he's going to resolve the third antinomy, because the thesis of the third antinomy that says freedom must exist because of the irrationality of an infinite regress, and the empiricist explanation of the antithesis of the third antinomy, that freedom cannot exist, that everything happens everything in the world happens by means of cause and effect, that these two can be reconciled by saying, in fact, the argument of the thesis is correct, or at least permissible, admissible, from the intelligible perspective. And the argument of the antithesis and its perspective is necessary from the point of view of the thing as it appears to us.